is Allison Profit, and I'm the founder of Profit Coach, and that's profit like making money, but spelled with 2 F's. And I am a consultant, coach, and trainer specifically around the topic of shifting your perspective of sales from stressful to fun. And I just love helping business owners really step into the power of their abilities to sell their own products and services. And I'm actually also the managing director for the Women Entrepreneur and Business Owner Network for the Northern Colorado chapter. So for short, it's WeBo Network. And I'm sure you've seen the WeBo Network name on a number of the materials that we've sent out. Shannon and Melissa are both on the leadership team of this chapter. We just launched up here in April, and we were supposed to actually have a number of information meetings to share with the local community of women entrepreneur and business owners about our new chapter. And of course, as we all are familiar with, the coronavirus hit and everything started to shut down. So we really weren't able to get that message out there. And so this, in addition to being a really great value add to our local community as everybody is navigating the situation we're all in, we thought it would be a great way to also highlight WeBo Network. They are one of the primary sponsors for this event. And WeBo is Colorado's fastest growing professional advisory group for women, offering mastermind and thought partnering while building community through the shared experience of being a women business owner. And as mentioned, we did recently launch our Northern Colorado chapter, and we serve Fort Collins, Loveland, Greeley, and all the surrounding communities. And we encourage you to visit webonetwork.com to check out our extensive event calendar of network. Everything that we do is currently virtual, although we are excited to get back into in-person meetings, as I know all of us are looking forward to that in-person human connection again. And thank you so much to WeBo Network. They've actually extended a special offer for 20% off of membership for all Thrive Summit attendees. So we're really grateful for their ability to help us to spread the word to the community and to help really support this summit in a lot of different ways. So excited to get to connect with all of you. We've got a great panel lined up for you today. And Melissa, I'll toss it back over to you.
Oops, I guess I got to turn on my mic. Yes, thank you so much. So I have the wonderful pleasure of introducing Shannon Richardson to you. She, as Allison said, is a member of the leadership team at our WeBo NoCo organization. And she is also one of the leaders and organizers of this event. And she's an amazing woman. You've got to get to know her if you don't already. She's a financial advisor with Merrill Lynch in Fort Collins. She has over 20 years of experience in the financial industry. With her background in business banking, lending, and retirement planning, Shannon is able to provide insight to many different aspects of a business. Her passion is helping business owners realize success by looking at their entire financial picture on both sides of the balance sheet. When not at work or serving her various nonprofits in the community, Shannon enjoys traveling, reading, abstract painting, and hanging out with her adorable bulldog, Sarge. Shannon.
Thank you, Melissa, and thanks to all of our panelists and for all of you that are participating in the Finance and Cash Management panel today. As Melissa mentioned, the purpose of the panels this week, and really this event in its entirety, is to share information and ideas with each other and our fellow business owners in the community. So this is an opportunity for you to get clarification and ask some questions that have been kind of burning in your brain. So if you would, please, you can go ahead and start now. There's a Q&A box. Depending on what type of device you're on, you'll see that in the toolbar on the Zoom page. You can just touch your screen or click on the page and you'll see that pop up, and it just says Q&A box. So drop your questions in there. And I want to go ahead and get started by introducing our expert panelists today. First off, we have Amanda Kendall. And Amanda is the owner and founder of Elevating Profits. And she has been in the tax and accounting industry for 17 years. 8 of those 17 years has been as an entrepreneur herself. And Amanda works with her clients so they can truly understand how their numbers work so they can be intentional about their profitability. And, you know, one comment that Amanda made is that she's had to make a shift and have a large part of her focus being to help her clients navigate the CARES Act. And I think the CARES Act will probably be a hot topic as we get started today. Next up, we have Ryann Hodge, and Ryann grew up in small business. Her family owned multiple small businesses when she was growing up, and it gave her a unique opportunity to gain perspective from all aspects of business and numerous industries as well. And after graduating from CSU, Ryann went on to achieve her EA, which is an enrolled agent designation, and then founded Momentum Tax. So over the last 18 years, Ryan's been working with entrepreneurs to help them in creating accounting processes, increasing cash flow, decreasing tax liabilities, which we all love that part, and, you know, really just helping to grow a scalable and sellable business, right? Because we have to have an exit strategy at the end of this. And in her free time, Ryann does enjoy just the active Colorado lifestyle, especially being around the water with her friends and her family. And finally, our final panelist is Jennifer Spencer. And Jennifer is a consultant with the Small Business Development Center, the Larimer Small Business Development Center, with a focus on intellectual property. And if you know Jennifer, you know she's a bit of a Renaissance woman. So in that she is a fantastic abstract painter. If you've seen her art here locally, she has invented and patented products. She's been the CEO of Startup Ventures. She successfully commercialized products on an international scale. She raised children, and she's even sung in rock and roll bands. So you can see what I mean by being a Renaissance woman. But like our other panelists, when business owners in our community were faced with navigating COVID, Jennifer really stepped up and became this amazing resource and has been very diligent in making sure that she's getting timely information out to the folks in our community. So before we start and open it up for Q&A, I wanted just to ask each of the panelists a question to get our discussion going, and maybe to give our participants an opportunity to drop their questions in the Q&A box. So Amanda, I'm going to start with you. How can business owners manage cash flow when their revenue has stopped or even just slowed significantly?
Yes, that's a great question, because I think a lot of business owners, especially small business owners, are feeling that hit right now with everything that's gone on with coronavirus. So it's really a two-part process. The first thing is really managing your expenses. I've been consulting with a lot of my clients and just a lot of business owners in general right now, and telling them unfortunately it's the time to cut everything that's not necessary to you operating right now. If it's not bringing in revenue at this point, or if it's not necessary for you to have a business on the other side of this, then it needs to be cut right now. That includes certain types of memberships and maybe mentorships that you're doing. That includes subscriptions to things that you're doing. If you can cut any type of utilities, and not necessarily like your phone and stuff, but if you can cut anything in that realm, do that. Talk to your creditors would be the second part of that. We have, for several of our clients, we've been able to push off thousands of dollars of creditor bills over the next couple of months, and being able to either reduce those or just completely put a halt to those for a few months. We've even gotten some of them money back by calling up the banks or their credit cards and simply just asking them, like, can we have a refund of fees that we've paid over the last 6 months, and getting money actually back into their account for them. So it really is just looking at where you can bring money into the business through unconventional avenues like that, and really managing those expenses to just really put a halt to anything that's not going to get you through this as a necessity right now.
All great advice. Any of our panelists want to expand on that before I go on to the next question?
I mean, I think that I agree with you completely on the ideas that you presented. And I kind of specialized a little bit in this last 6 weeks with very, very small businesses. Even single person operations can do exactly what you said. And sometimes, are you finding this too, that you're looking for those expense reductions, not only in your business, but also in your personal life?
Yes.
Right? Because if you're a solopreneur, sometimes it's not that you have this big operation and lots of suppliers and lots of things that you're working with, but instead, you know, you have your personal mortgage and your personal credit cards and your personal student loans and things like that. And I found opportunities for small businesses on a personal level too.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you can reduce some of the personal spending, then what the business is bringing in is going to go farther for you.
Thank you, ladies. Ryann, what changes have you made? And also, I think it'd be interesting to hear, as we are all business owners, what your answer is for your own practices. But what changes have you made in business operations, or suggestions that you've made to your clients in business operations to create new or adjust your current revenue streams?
Absolutely. And I would love to take all the credit, but really, our clients have been brilliant in coming up with their own new sources of revenue. Just a couple of examples. We have a laser engraving shop out of Boulder that does giant orders for like Iron Man. And they immediately realized they were going to be non-essential and going to be shut down with 0 income coming in and 8 employees on unemployment. So they, stuck at home with their 2- and 5-year-old children, came up with the idea of using their equipment to cut face shields for the healthcare industry. So they went from 0 income potential to being an essential business and providing something that is absolutely needed all over the country and world right now. So that was not my idea, that was their idea, but I am just so excited for the different businesses that are coming up with new and different ideas. Another example is gyms. All of these gyms that are closed, we've got smaller gyms with personal fitness and CrossFit and Pilates, and they've come up with online courses that they're offering. They've loaned out their equipment to their members. Everybody's really working together, and I just love seeing that. So it's not even as much about what we've done in our business to change operations, but as much as I just enjoy seeing all of the positive reactions and the innovative ideas that businesses are coming up with. And I'm hoping to hear some of those here today as well. I hope to hear that.
Thank you. That kind of segues nicely to my question I was going to ask Jennifer, is that, we're always wanting to find a silver lining in situations like these. So Ryann shared a couple of her clients that turned this into an opportunity. So what other types of opportunities has the pandemic created?
Oh gosh, Shannon, always out of some kind of crisis, we find these amazing, beautiful, strong businesses that emerge. And what I see, again, since I'm working with the smallest of businesses, is almost a get out of jail free card. That's what it seems like to me. It's like an opportunity to try something that you hadn't done before because you were so busy hustling and so busy every day getting your regular business done. But now you have a little moment to pause. You can look around, and you don't need to pivot in a completely different direction. You don't have to go out and build ventilators if your business is something entirely different. Instead, you can, as Ryann pointed out, you can pivot a little bit with your existing business and try something that you haven't done before. And it may work. And if it does, it could carry you forward in a more profitable way. And if it doesn't work, no one is going to look down on you and say, why'd they try that? Or what was that for? Or why'd they use resources in that way? Instead, it's a get out of jail free card. And I think that's one of the big optimistic points in this.
So I realized you can't have a window up and unmute yourself at the same time. So just a little tech insight for my fellow panelists here. I wanted to we have been getting some questions into the Q&A box. The first question we have was around PPP. And I think we all expected that this could be a very popular subject today. So, and this person said, we're waiting to hear if we will be accepted through round 2 of PPP loans. Do you know if loans will only be of retroactive for payroll to staff prior to receiving being approved? So and I'm happy to take the first part of this and then open it up for the other panelists as well. So although I'm with Merrill Lynch is a Bank of America corporation, and many of you might be aware that Bank of America was the first financial institution to build in their process and their portal to be able to start accepting PPP loans. So I'm proud that we've been at the forefront in getting that information out there for folks. So to answer your question, with the second round of funding, Congress did pass last week an additional $310 billion for the PPP loan. $60 billion of that is being earmarked for the smaller banks and credit unions and institutions. And I think the idea behind that is there was some concern that the larger banks, the Bank of Americas, the JP Morgans, the Wells, the Citi, that because they had the capacity around technology and human capital to be able to launch their process faster than some of these smaller community regional banks, that the clients of those smaller institutions were not going to be serviced. And so I appreciate that the government this time was sure to earmark $60 billion for those smaller institutions. So only the clients of those smaller institutions are able to get to that portion of it. In regards to the payroll, here's the rules around that. And I think a lot of it, what you might be curious about is the loan forgiveness aspect of it. So I think most of us know that 75% of the loan must be used towards payroll expenses for it to be forgiven. And the period that's going to be analyzed, the period that you're going to want to track your expenses in, are the 8 weeks after the origination of the loan. So when you're talking about like the second round of funding, so if you hadn't gotten approval yet, you could still technically be in the first round of funding, because as the banks were pushing these loans into the SBA set certain commitments for each of these institutions dependent upon how many applications they had submitted. So it's quite possible, even if you haven't received an approval or your loan hasn't been originated yet, that you're still in that first round of funding. And now we have the second round of funding. And I think for us, and what our CEO had said on Face the Nation yesterday, is let's just make sure, government, that we're fully funding this program, because it shouldn't have to be a race. Anyone who qualifies to receive this PPP funds should be able to get it and not be concerned about whether or not their bank is processing their application quickly enough so that they can take part in that funding. So there are some other things around the forgiveness that I could get into, but I want to open it up to the other panelists to see if they would like to add anything.
Yeah, so I can add to that a little bit. I've done a lot of reading and research and digging into the CARES Act, as I'm sure everybody on here has. As you said, Shannon, that 8-week window does start when the loan is originated. So, for example, I have a client who runs a business and her payroll is a month delayed. So payroll that she's getting ready to pay this week is technically from the end of March. And so she was a little confused about, well, does that qualify? Because it's not in that 8-week window that they earned those revenues. And what I was explaining to her is but it's in that 8-week window that you are paying that. So it's what's being paid out in that 8-week window, not necessarily what they've earned in that 8-week window.
Right. And I think, someone expanded on the question of saying, we own a bar and we're mandated to be closed. And, we already have our loan approved and funded, but wouldn't it make more sense to have that 8-week start after we open? And I think what we've come to see with a lot of our clients is that they have opted to not take the funds until they are opening, because they understand that 8-week mark starts at the time of origination. So, unfortunately, you've already taken those funds, so you can't really retrace that. But the idea would have been you had to furlough your employees prior to the PPP loan being funded. Now you've got this funding. This should help you with being able to pay that payroll for the next 8 weeks. So if you furloughed prior to origination and your intention is to rehire during that 8 weeks, you're not going to be penalized. So just keep that in mind. Anybody else have something to add to that?
Ooh, can we just point our naughty fingers at the media for creating this craze where everybody has to rush out and try to get these loans without thinking through those opportunities of, if I wait until I can hire my employees back on, that's better and potentially creates more forgivability of the loan. But yes, and I think Amanda can probably agree that there have been so many changes from the point this was first announced, that this just constantly changes, like every other day. Like I feel like all I do is read CARES Act and all of these bills, and like this is not information that my brain really understands anyways. So this is a lot. So don't feel bad if you don't understand what's going on, because the majority of the country doesn't understand this, and we're all working together. And even the forgivability now, we're waiting on guidance on how are we going to prove what should be forgiven. So this is a mess, and just go with the flow as best you can, and we're all going to be okay.
Yeah, I think that's why we're, as an organization and institution, we're encouraging the government just to make sure it's funded. That anybody who wants to apply for PPP when it's appropriate for them, they know that the monies will be there. People have, because like you said, the way that it was released, there's only $350 billion, and the money's going to go like that. It's going to be gone. And everybody rushed out, and for the participant that asked the question, we're a bar, we're not allowed to be open yet, therefore I'm not bringing on my full staff, only enough to handle carry out or whatever it might be. It might have made more sense for them to do this later, but there was such this rush to get everything in before the money ran out. So with the second round of funding, I would just lean really heavily on your advisors, talk to your lenders, and talk to your accountants or CPAs to get this information, because it may be a better choice for you to wait until you actually plan on rehiring those employees. So the rules is once that 8-week period of from when your loan originates, if you lay off employees during that 8-week period, then that forgiven amount will be reduced. If you reduce wages by 25% or more in that year, per year, or more per year, so that would be the 25% of a year's salary, that forgivable amount will be reduced by the amount of the pay cut. So again, if you had to let employees go before accepting the loan and your intent is to rehire them, you will not be penalized, but I think there's still kind of a gray area there that we're all trying to navigate. Okay, so let's see, we have some more questions. One person asked, hey, I got the PPP. That's gonna help me for 8 weeks, but beyond that, what can we do beyond that? Does somebody wanna take that question?
I can. So I think the PPP is probably the most popular part of the CARES Act for what people are talking about, because it's just, like Ryan said, the media has given it so much attention. It's the one that everybody's rushing out to get. But there are other aspects of the CARES Act that come into play here. You have the EIDL directly through the SBA, that if you haven't applied for, I think they opened up applications for that again today. So you can apply for that. There's some tax credits and some tax deferrals in the CARES Act. So there's a lot of things you can do outside of just the PPP to stretch your dollar as far as possible over the next year while we're in this COVID recovery phase, as I've been referring to it. So it's not just the PPP, there's lots of other things. And then I think it comes down to budgeting and cash flow management as well, and really just being strategic and intentional around where you're spending every dollar and what's coming into the business.
So I would just add too, I actually have this as part of my my closing remarks, but as this question is coming up, we're getting some of this relief in these programs, but what do we do beyond that? I would just say be diligent in finding access, like Amanda's saying, to all these other things. There isn't just PPP and EIDL. There's other things out there. So if I can give you a website to reference, it's choosecolorado.com/COVID-19. It's the Colorado Office of Economic Development, and they have a massive list of alternative funding sources that includes grants from the city, the county, the state, federal, but it also includes grants from private corporations. We've got a lot of corporations out there that really stand by being socially responsible, and they're stepping up to the plate during this crisis. So I don't want to go through all of them, just go to that website, but just to tell you guys about a few of them. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce has the Save Small Business Fund that's giving out $5,000 grants. I think you have to have between 3 and 30 employees, and that just went live on April 20th. Facebook, I didn't see Facebook's max grant amount, but their rules were that you had to be a for-profit business, you had to employ between 2 and 50 employees, and you had to be in business for over a year. Verizon's given away $10,000 grants. Google's budgeted $340 million in ad credits to help businesses be able to continue their marketing efforts when they're having to maybe peel back their marketing costs right now. And GoFundMe, which I think typically we think of GoFundMe as, you know, I've had these unexpected medical expenses, or this family went through this horrible circumstance and they're trying to raise money. Business owners now are also utilizing GoFundMe to raise funds. Your customers love you. They want to see you survive and thrive through this. I would just say, on the other hand, be careful and be very specific about what those funds would be used for, so they don't interact with your PPP and EIDL qualifications. But if you raise at least $500 in your own GoFundMe campaign, they'll match $500. So again, just go to the choosecolorado.com/COVID-19 website. There's just so many resources and alternative funding sources out there that can help you beyond this 8 weeks. Okay, we have lots of questions here. Let me see. It says, hi, before all of this happened, I was getting ready to meet with lenders to apply for, oh, that's fun. So when I'm reading, they keep popping up. Getting ready to apply for a real estate and or working capital loan from the SBA to open a brick and mortar coffee house retail store. Obviously the SBA and bankers have a lot on their plate right now. My personal financing banking mentor is busier than he has ever been, and I don't even want to bother him with questions. You know what, I think I have a lot of experience in SBA lending. So, so for Lisa, I think we're going to send a follow-up email, and I'd be happy to give you some advice on that offline if you'd like, because that's a lot to get into right now. Okay. And I think this one I might send to Jennifer. What are your thoughts regarding best programs for solopreneurs, freelance, and gig workers?
Well, you're right, because often those are single person entities. I think that what I hear over and over is that I feel like I'm a square peg trying to fit into a round hole when it comes to the EIDL and PPP programs. That, if I'm a single member LLC, I'm filing on a Schedule C and I don't really have payroll. Does that work? You know, there's a lot of questions around that. Shannon, I'm kind of encouraged by the pandemic unemployment insurance. Traditional unemployment was something that was paid into by employers. It was a state fund. If you were laid off, you could apply for unemployment and have 26 weeks of maybe 55% of your weekly pay to carry over until you had a new job. But that didn't work for self-employed people, gig workers, 1099, freelancers. There's 57 to 75 million people in the United States that don't pay into an unemployment fund. So as part of the CARES Act, there was money designated for something called pandemic unemployment assistance. And pandemic unemployment assistance is specifically for these people we just described, the gig workers, the freelancers, the solopreneurs. It just recently went live. What it appears that they're going to be looking for there is you're going to present your tax returns. You're going to show what your net income was in the last tax year that you filed. And you're going to describe why you have a loss as a result of that. So I have a lot of musicians who are doing no gigs this summer. I have a lot of creative people in many areas, massage therapists, hairdressers, window washers, lawnmowers, landscapers, anybody whose business has been impacted. You can qualify for pandemic unemployment assistance if you can show that there's been a loss of income due to COVID-19. And what you get, what's valuable here is that, in the way that I like to think about it, is that it is at its heart a stimulus program. So you receive some percentage of that loss of income, some percentage. And I can't really say, in traditional unemployment, it's 55% of your weekly wages. For pandemic, I don't know exactly the percentage. But in addition, you get $600 per week as a stimulus bonus. So if you qualify for the base benefit, even if you qualify for $25 a week, you'll still receive the $600 per week stimulus bonus. So for lots of these square pegs and people who are cobbling their life together, have income sources from a variety of places, pandemic unemployment assistance could be the ticket.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think that's making a huge difference for a lot of our solopreneur gig folks. Let's see, this would be for Amanda or Ryan. I'll let one of you gals take this. Talking about the loan forgiveness rule and PPP. And the question is, what about the rule if the business is back to their full-time employment status by June 30th, if it can be forgiven?
I can jump in on that.
Thanks, Amanda.
Or Ryan, if you want to, and then I'll follow you up. Either way. So from what I've read on this, the biggest issue that we're seeing with this full-time equivalent by June 30th is that the 8-week window also ends June 30th. So if businesses aren't getting their funds or postponing getting their funds until mid to late May, we could risk them not having a full 8 weeks to look at the forgiveness. So the FTE requirement, the full-time equivalent, my interpretation of this, and keep in mind, this is an 880-page bill that every single person that's read it has had to interpret and put out to their client base and their audience. But my interpretation of this is that the full-time equivalent is, so for example, I have a coffee shop that I work with, and they've had a couple of their employees that are like, well, I'm making more on unemployment than what I was making once I get the $600 additional. And so they're opting to not come back to work. And so what they've done is they've reached out and they're hiring in people that may have been unemployed prior to COVID, so they don't qualify for that extra $600 through the pandemic unemployment. As long as they're keeping the dollar amount and the number of employees at the equivalent, then they can get that forgiveness in that 8 weeks. It doesn't have to be the same employees.
And I think too, so just to let you guys know, we have a lot of questions coming in, and we're going to try to get to as many as possible today. If we don't get to your question today, or something pops up later that you think of, you can go to the Facebook group. You would have received the link to the Facebook group in your confirmation email when you registered. You can pop your questions in there. I don't know if you've noticed, I've been kind of over here making notes because I want to make sure to follow up and get some more clarification on this, because I think there might be some more clarification available this afternoon on a call that I'm going to be on around this 8 weeks from origination versus the June 30th. So I definitely want to get clarification for those of you that are asking questions about that. Ryan, did you want to expand at all on that one?
I was just going to full-heartedly agree with Amanda in that, we're talking about an 880-page bill, but on top of that, we're getting guidance slowly trickling in from all of these other constituents between the IRS and the Treasury and everybody. So yeah, trying to understand and get through all of this is less than fun, but we're all working together on it. Yep.
Yeah. I had someone that asked for the website again for the alternative funding. It's choosecolorado.org. payroll.com/COVID-19. It's the website for our Colorado Office of Economic Development. It's just a spinoff from their main website. Let's see. And you may have clarified this a little bit, Jennifer, but how do you prove that loss of income so that's accepted? I think this is in regards to the PUA, the pandemic unemployment assistance. How can they prove that? You know, obviously they're not filing returns for their current loss of income. So how have you suggested that they prove that?
So again, just as Ryan and Amanda have suggested, we are interpreting the information that we're given in the best way possible. And I have attended as many training sessions as I can on this. My understanding is that they want to approve as many as they can because at its heart, it's a stimulus program. So that's the first thing to remember, is they want to approve it because it's a stimulus program. The second thing to remember is that they are a bureaucracy. And as a bureaucracy, there will be boxes to check and lines to fill in. So we have to keep both of these things in mind. Even though you're a square peg and I'm saying that this program is for you, it's not going to fit you exactly. So how do you know? There is on one of the pages on the Pandemic Unemployment Assistant application, a box that's this big. That's what it appears to be. But if you look outside, you see that you have 3,800 characters to describe why you are unemployed as a result of the COVID-19. So in that box, what I'm suggesting to people is that they take the time to explain how they've lost money, whether there are 1099s they're not receiving, whether they are a hairdresser and their business is not essential and therefore closed, whether they, you know, whatever that might be, they're going to explain it in that little box. They're going to look at the tax returns. Again, I guess my advice on this is that the people who are going to be looking at this, the Colorado Department of Employment and Labor is doing a magnificent job in revising their system to accept these pandemic unemployment assistance. However, they don't know tax returns. And for Ryan or Amanda or Shannon, any of you who have dealt with people who tend to think in W-2 income as opposed to in tax returns and understanding the tax return, it's a really big shift. So it's going to be a lot to expect. So we're going to fill in the blanks. We're going to know it's a stimulus. We're going to explain in the 3,800 characters in as best way as we possibly can why there's a loss. And we're going to know that it's a stimulus program. That's how we're going to show it. And if you didn't show income at all in previous years, you're going to have a tough time. You're going to be a square peg that needs to find a different way to get funding.
And for those that are able to apply for PUA and they get qualified for that, Jennifer, how would that affect PPP and EIDL? Are you suggesting to folks that you consult with that it's one or the other, or are they able to take advantage of all of those programs?
I'm suggesting it's one or the other. There's no double dipping. So payroll protection plan, right? That payroll protection program is a replacement of payroll. So if you are getting a PPP loan, then you are not considered unemployed. So you can't get both at the same time. You can see where you fit in better and choose the one that works best for you.
Thank you.
Can I add?
Yeah,
can
absolutely.
I add to that? Awesome. So this is a struggle, right? Looking at which is better, and there's kind of some thresholds that you have to look at based on your own finances as to which is going to be the best first move. But we've encouraged a lot of solopreneurs to go for the PPP loan and get that first, cover the first 8 weeks. And then at that point, if they're still really unable to work or not bring in the income or the same amount of income, to go after the unemployment. Again, that is there are very specific numbers to look at for that. So do your research or reach out to one of us to help you with that. But you can go for both, just not at the same time.
Yeah, Ryan took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say, I've been advising a lot of people as well, do one and then the other, but you can't do them both for the same time frame. It really is all about strategizing, looking at the numbers, and figuring out what's going to be best for you to make it through all of this.
Thank you. Switching gears just a little bit, someone was asking, is there any chance for startups to be looked at in the foreseeable future with everything going on? Or they're asking, should I refocus my energy on something else? So I'd be interested to hear what our panelists think about that.
Is the question, Shannon, is a crisis a good time to start a business? Is that what it is?
I think so, and maybe some part of if they had a need to raise capital or get financing in place, would that be an option?
Well, I mean, what's the list? I wrote this down. I wish I had my list in front of me, but Uber, Pinterest, Instagram, were all started during the 2008 crisis. I mean, there are major businesses that are a regular part of what we think about in life right now without even thinking, that started in the last crisis. Is there money available for if you're at the scale up level where you're looking for a kind of angel or venture money? I mean, that I don't know if we have any angel or venture funders, you know, people who associate are in that space on this panel. I think that there will be money available. I think it's going to be a little bit trickier. And what a pandemic does is it says, I mean, right, any business, you need to identify a problem, and you need to provide a solution for a problem, and you have to have a way to be able to communicate that, so that if people are willing to pay money for the solution, then you have a business that works. And in a pandemic, even more, it's forced, it's in front of you in a bigger way. So if you start, oh gosh, any business that starts during a really tough time is going to be a business that has the skill set, the knowledge, the know-how to go forward and really have a successful business over the long haul. I won't go on too much longer, but sometimes in very abundant times, people start businesses and they're able to kind of keep it going and have it be because there's a lot of abundance. You know, you turn to something that's a little bit harder time and it just fails because they really didn't have a clear vision for what that business was. So do I think you can? Absolutely I do. Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree 100%. I wonder if maybe the question was kind of directing to, you know, being able to get perhaps SBA funding. And what I would say to that, and regardless of what type of environment we're in, there's certain things that an SBA lender is going to look for, and that's just going to be that you have some skin in the game. Do you have some capital to work with? What do your financial projections look like? And does it seem like it's going to be a viable business so the bank can take on that risk? So I agree 100%. I was just thinking the same thing, Jennifer, that so many businesses were founded during the Great Recession and found success. I have clients who, you know, survived and thrived through 2008, and they've only been able to grow their business over the years. So I wouldn't let something like this deter you. I think what happened in the recession is, you know, as like now, we had a lot of unemployed folks or high unemployment numbers. And that's when really the creativity comes out and how to establish something. You know, you've got this skill set, you know, you have a product or service that is needed and wanted. And if you have a way to deliver that, absolutely you can find success. And I think there's a lot of companies right now that are successful even more so because of this, because they had a product or service that's allowing people to continue living their lives during the pandemic. Ryan or Amanda, do you guys have anything to add?
I just want to say my motto is, you know the answer if you don't ask. You don't ask for those funds, the answer is no. So go for it. If you've got an idea, I think this is a great time. Like you said, the creativity is flowing because people maybe are working less or working from home or maybe kind of feeling stuck. So absolutely, let those creative juices flow and let's see what comes out of this recession.
Yeah. Someone says rent is a big expense. And so far, I think they're being a little facetious here, but so far our awesome landlord has Oh, no, they did mean it. I'm sorry. I thought they were being facetious, but they're saying they actually are awesome. So far, our awesome landlord has said not to worry about the next 2 months, but they want to know if there will be other loan programs to help either landlords or renters for forgiveness of losses from rents.
So the EIDL actually, when you're filling out that application, had a box for loss of rent. So landlords were able to fill it out for that. From just a straightforward answer standpoint, and I'm sure Ryan would agree with this, on a tax stance, those landlords are going to benefit by reduced income and larger losses on their tax returns. And with some of the changes that came with the CARES Act, there's a larger capacity to write some of that off.
I have Amanda, I have a question. So it was my understanding, and I'm gonna rely on your expertise on this. Let's say I had a coffee shop and I am going to apply for a PPP loan or EIDL loan because I can't run my business. Is the same true for the landlord? If I'm in the business of being owning property and I've lost income as a result of COVID, that I can apply for these loans, the PPP or the EIDL loan, because my business has been affected. My business, which is having tenants, has been affected by COVID-19.
The EIDL, absolutely. The PPP is going to be dependent on how they're set up and whether they have wages or any income subject to self-employment tax to qualify for that.
So that's what I was thinking. So for the person that asked the question, it's important to know that that the landlord could very well have relief by applying for the same loans that you're applying for, because they have a business that has been affected by COVID-19. So when you're in a negotiation with them, that's part of what you want to keep in your head.
Exactly. And going back to Ryan's statement earlier, if you don't ask, the answer is always no.
Right. And this I think Jennifer and I have had this conversation in the past weeks. What about the solopreneurs who just started their business late last year and can't show income for 2019? Because the rule is as long as they were in business as of February of this year. They said they're feeling like a square peg, Jennifer, so I'm going to let you take that one.
I think it's tricky. You know, we have, each of the loans have kind of have a sweet spot for a certain type of individual. For someone who has a business that hasn't made any income, or is just starting it and is in really the nascent stages and hasn't, they've spent more money than they've made. I'm not aware of any of the current programs that are available for them at this time. And I think, to go back to the very beginning where Amanda started, was what you're going to need to do is really work on cash flow management and reduction of expenses in that situation. Because at this time, and Ryan or Amanda, if either of you know something else, at this time, for someone who had no income, I'm not seeing, all of these programs so far require a demonstration of loss of income. So if you had no income, it's going to be trickier.
I would agree with that. What we've seen with some of the clients we've been assisting through this is, even if they had no income in 2019, but they were in business, if you can provide a profit and loss that can be relied upon for 2020 numbers, they are using that to prove loss of income.
Another thing is what Shannon mentioned. You know, I have some creatives who are, you know, fine artists and musicians and crafters, and their income may exist or may be very, very low. And I have had some of them, there are some fine art grants that are available. Peggy Lyle with the Creative District has put together a marvelous resource for that. I'll try to look that up during the questions and get that out here as well. But it's possible that you could be eligible for a grant, not a large grant, but it could be possible that you'd be eligible for a grant.
Shannon, you're muted.
Sorry. My bulldog came in, and so I muted myself and then forgot that I was muted. Oh, the joys of working from home, right, folks? So to go back to the landlord conversation, I think this will go for Ryan and Amanda. Their question is, can the landlord defer rent, get the tax benefits, get the PPP loan, and then later on demand the rent? Would that be considered double dipping?
I think we're really waiting on specifics and guidance regarding this, but that seems like more of an ethical question to me than what's been released in guidance right now. That doesn't sound right to me. I lost my train of thought.
I agree with Ryan. I think that's definitely an ethical issue, but I think to me, that would appear as double dipping. And I think, so think of it this way, when you get these PPP funds and this forgiveness portion, whatever portion is forgiven, whatever those expenses are not technically expenses to you any longer because they were essentially through government funding. So you can't claim those expenses on your taxes, and I would assume it would be the exact same for the landlord situation.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. This one upsets me a little bit, but someone said our landlord mentioned that they would take equity in the business that can't pay. And I have my own feelings on that, but I'm going to open it up to the panelists to see if maybe we're on the same page.
Taking equity in your business is a legal document that you have to sign. So if you're not in agreement with that, they cannot force you to that. That's going to be my very PC answer on that.
I agree. I would not encourage anybody to give up equity in their business right now in order to pay rent. And keep in mind that when you're working with your landlord or other creditors, it's possible that they're offering deferral of payments or that they're actually forgiving payments. So make sure that you're clear on whether they're actually forgiving the payments or if they're deferring them until later when you can potentially pay them.
I think another thing to take into consideration here is that we need to think about the balance of power. So in my lifetime, the power has been on the side of the table of the landlord or the bank because they have the money and they can set the terms. But now it has shifted to our side of the table. And the reason is that the banks don't want to own every house, every car, and every big screen TV in the country. And from the landlord's perspective, the landlord does not want to end this with a vacant building. Mm-hmm. So if you are a commercial client in a building, there's going to be a lot of businesses struggling. If they like you enough that they want to have equity in your business, it would, from the negotiating perspective, what I would say is they think you're a valuable tenant. And if you are a valuable tenant and they want you to stay there, then the power is more on your side of the table in the negotiation. You can say, no, I don't, perhaps I don't want to do equity. I'm looking for a deferment. That would work better for me. Or some other, it's always contractual. So anything can be put on the table. And just like was said earlier, if you don't ask, then you don't get. Well, it's fair to ask, and there's not anything wrong with asking, but you have a right too then to say, that doesn't feel good to me. I'd like to stay in this building. I'd like to be a tenant here. So let's see if we can come up with some other ideas that might work to be more mutually beneficial.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, not that having someone take equity in a business that's struggling as a way of raising capital and surviving, not that that's a bad thing to do, but I think you go into those relationships with purpose. So you don't go into them because of situational circumstance. So meaning you wouldn't necessarily want your landlord to be a business partner if you don't know how you would act together as business partners. And depending on the percentage of equity that is given away, that would also limit your capability when it comes to lending and getting financing. So I think we've kind of said what our feelings are on that. We're all on the same page that, you know, I think your landlord would much prefer to not have an empty building and try to find a commercial tenant, especially in this environment, and that to be open to discuss what options there might be for you to pay over the next several months would just be a mutually beneficial situation. So, but on that, absolutely, if it's something that you're actually considering, make sure to consult with your attorney or reach out to one of your other trusted advisors and get a referral for an attorney to have that discussion. Let's see. Okay. My landlord also keeps asking us if we have applied for PPP or if we have received funding. They said they haven't applied themselves. Do they have the right to ask us this? Do I have to answer?
That's an interesting one that was further clarified just in the last few days, that the PPP loan funds are not going to be public information. So this is not something you have to share with anybody. I would not answer that question. And I don't even know why they're openly telling you about their position. That's not wise.
Yeah, and I think too is you would want to be careful with utilizing the PPP for rents. It can be used for business operations, but if you don't have 75% or more of that going towards payroll, then it's not going to be a forgivable loan. But look, it's a 1% loan too, with a 6-month deferral and payment. So even if it's not a forgivable loan, wow, I mean, who wouldn't take a 1% loan as a business owner, you know, and even maybe try to pay down some higher cost debt with that. So, but no, I mean, you shouldn't have to share your financial situation. I think you can have a frank conversation with your landlord without giving them personal information about your situation. Anyone else want to add to that? So another question, it says, we're currently a for-profit business. However, during this time, we have started to develop a community needs project that they hadn't had time to work on before this. Unfortunately, this product would be better positioned with a nonprofit business as it would need separate funding. And being for-profit removes us from about 80% of grants out there. Can we partner with a nonprofit, or can we start a separate nonprofit portion to help fund this new program? Or is this just a conflict of interest?
You can absolutely start a separate nonprofit, but that is a process in itself with a lengthy application and forecasted financials. I would say, depending on what the project is, it may be a great idea to partner with a local nonprofit or a nonprofit to come up with this project together.
Yeah, and there are, you know, you can speak to Sarah Scobie with the library. She is a nonprofit specialist. There is, I know I have a friend, Kim Fisher, who runs a nonprofit consultant firm. So I would say, and again, if you want to drop that in the Facebook, I think it'll make it easier for us to get you connected to the specific resources that you need when we're able to only provide general feedback for you today. So please definitely drop that into the Facebook group, and I think we'll all be happy to provide those connections with our nonprofit consultant friends that would be able to speak better to that question. Okay, so to prepare properly for the next financial crisis, what do you recommend your clients have in place, you know, along the lines of emergency funds and things of that nature?
Oh, this is such a good question, and this is where a lot of focus has been with business owners lately. I personally recommend working towards having 6 months of operating capital in a savings account for your business, because if every business owner had that going into this, there wouldn't be a single failed business coming out of this. I truly believe that.
Yeah.
In addition to that, I really think it is about budgeting and cash flow management. I say all the time, and I tell this to my clients over and over, a business that's not profitable can survive for years, but a business without positive cash flow is going to die in potentially months. And so it really does come down to cash flow management and really watching where your cash is being used and just planning and having that emergency fund set aside.
Yeah, that's great.
I absolutely agree. And I think that Amanda brought up a key point, is that in order to know your cash flow, you have to know your numbers. You have to have your finances organized so that you know what your income is, what your expenses are, where you have wiggle room, and where you can make changes. And that's something a lot of people, I think, are just terrified of, digging into those details. And so they just don't. And so how do they know if they have 6 months of operating expenses set aside? You have to know your numbers.
Yeah.
What a good time this is. Isn't it marvelous that we're having a pandemic, that business owners can take the time to understand their numbers? It's perfect. You know, another thing that I would advise people, again, on the small business solopreneur level, is get to know a banker. Have a budget in your, include in your budget money to have an accountant that helps you with things, because some of these professionals that you have relationships with, there's a value with it. And I believe that to a certain extent we've lost that, as so much has become online and digital, that you don't have that human relationship with someone. And I think in times of crisis, often those connections and that expertise can become very valuable for you.
Well, and I think just to piggyback on something Ryan said earlier with the pivot that so many businesses are doing and how they're coming up with a revenue source that 2-3 months ago they would have never even imagined in their wildest dreams, I think it's really important for business owners to understand this is a great opportunity as you're making that pivot and realizing where you do have another revenue source, that does not just have to be a COVID revenue source. It can be an ongoing revenue source that allows your business to grow and expand. But I think, pardon me, I think it's really important, especially for brick and mortar businesses, to realize the importance now more than ever that you cannot rely on people walking in your door as your only revenue source. Because if something like this ever happens again, you have to have a backup that is not reliant on face-to-face interactions.
Absolutely. And I want to piggyback on what Jennifer said about this being such a time to build relationships. And we've worked with nonprofits and clients and our own clients in that reminding everybody that you're there for them and what you can provide and how you can help is huge. And having that communication, it's such a world of do it yourself, online, yes, losing touch with finding an expert out there that can really help you, and you don't have to know everything. Business owners cannot wear 17 hats. They can't do everything and do it well. They've got to find the true trusted advisors that can do and help and guide in the areas that they're not knowledgeable.
Yeah, and Amanda, I was going to ask you, what are your thoughts about businesses that are considering lowering their prices during times like this to keep their operations going?
So I personally am not a fan of lowering prices just because I think it lowers our value in the consumer's eye. However, what I am a fan of right now is creating an alternative model. So this is still your base pricing. This is still what you charge. However, here's a different version of this that may not include all the bells and whistles of this, that is at a lower price point that may be a little bit more manageable for your consumer market now. But I don't think necessarily lowering prices is the answer. I think it's a pivot off that service offering that maybe cuts a few things out and brings that price down in turn.
Yeah. Ryan, I don't think any of us could have seen COVID-19 coming, but what have you heard, or how do you feel about what your clients wish they would have done 3 months, 6 months, even 12 months ago?
Not so much our clients, but I think in the general small business community, I agree with Amanda, is having that the reserves in place. A lot of small businesses don't maybe control their cash flow in a way that set them up for that kind of success. So that was huge. I think, like we've talked about, all of us have talked about just this being an opportunity to pivot and make changes, and kind of being forced out of our comfort zones into making those changes right now to adapt to the current state of things.
Yeah. And we had another question come in, and unfortunately it'll be the last question that we can take today. But again, thank you all so much for the wonderful questions. Don't forget to drop any questions that you didn't have answered today, or maybe that pop up in your head later. Drop those in the Facebook group, and we will be sure to follow up with you folks. And I did make a couple of notes to get information and resources to a couple of you that I think we could have given a more detailed answer to. So the last question, what kind of advisor should a very small business have, and what should we look for in the right advisor?
I have some answers for that. I work for the Larimer Small Business Development Center. And if you're really just starting out and you want to kind of get your feet on the ground and understand business and test your idea out, one valuable resource is the Lemur Sbdc. And the reason it's valuable to you is that it's free. There's no cost at all. You can come and see a consultant, and as long as your business is moving forward in some way, you can come an unlimited number of times. Once you come in the door, all kinds of resources are available to you. So we have dozens and dozens of consultants with expertise in different areas. So by and large, everyone has experience in the general aspects of running a business. But if you are specifically a restaurant, or you are specifically a franchise, or you are specifically in construction, we have expertise in those areas. So one good place to start is to the Sbdc, because it's free. From that, you can start to learn what is important to you in a mentor or consultant, because you can try on a relationship with different people in different ways and see what works and see what's like, what it's like and what helps you specifically. I happen to be a big idea generator. So when you talk to me, it's kind of like fireworks, right? And you have to take lots of notes and listen really carefully, because the conversation moves quickly. There are other people who are very methodical. So which one matches up with your style, or which one's complementary to your style to help you be a better business person? So anyway, that's one good place to start.
Yeah, and I would just say that I think overall you want to have a business consultant or mentor who has worked along the lines of something similar to what you have in your business. You also want to have someone on the financial side. What we see a lot of times are business owners go into business for themselves because they're really great at what they do, but it doesn't mean that you understand how to read a balance sheet or a profit and loss statement. So absolutely take the free resources as you're starting out. For your existing folks, once you get to that point, I always suggest outsourcing. You should be doing the things in your business that are helping you to grow, and not things that are, taking time away from you. And then one thing that I always find is a lot of folks will work with their personal banker that they've known for a really long time. And that's fantastic, but you've got to make sure that you have a banker who has experience in working with businesses, because it's completely different than, applying for a mortgage or something like that. So I'd say with your banking institutions, make sure you're working with a small business specialist, someone that actually knows small business. So Amanda, Ryan, we're going to go into final comments. So if you wouldn't mind, if you have anything to add to what kind of advisors it's really important for business owners to have, any final thoughts that you'd like to share. And we did ask all of our panelists this week that if they had something that they could offer to our participants, to please make those offers as well. So Ryan, if you want to add to the last question, final thoughts, and then if you have an offer for our participants today.
Absolutely. My final thoughts on advisors is that I really think that every business should have the following 4 advisors. You should have an attorney, a banker, like you said, a business banker, an accountant, and an insurance agent. And the key thing is with those trusted advisors is that you've got to be able to communicate with them and know that they're going to communicate back to you. So you have to be comfortable with being open and honest with them, because they cannot advise you well if you're holding back. And then you have to be able to trust that when you have questions, they're going to respond. And that's a huge issue, I think, in a lot of those industries, is finding people that are responsive.
And do you have an offer that you'd like to share with the participants today? I mean, it's not required, but if you had one, if you wanted to share.
I would say our biggest offer is our newsletter, and that's just information that we send out. Normally not very often, but the last 3 weeks, it's been like every 3 days. So signing up for our newsletter is probably your best bet to get current relevant information very, very quickly.
Thank you, Ryann. Amanda?
So I would have to say I agree with Ryann on the 4 advisors. Those are the 4 that I always recommend to my clients as well, that they need to have. And when it comes specifically to the accounting one, I really think you have to be able to have that open and honest relationship. Like she said, you have to be able to share the good, the bad, and the ugly regardless, and not feel like you're going to be judged for it. But you also should be looking for an accounting professional that is saving you more money than what you're paying them. I think that's the ideal key factor there when it comes to an accounting professional. Is you have, it's a dime a dozen out there. You could throw a rock and hit probably 10 accounting firms within a 15-20 block radius. But making sure that you can have that open relationship and making sure that they really understand your industry and your business, so that they're going to really be able to benefit you and save you more money than what their fees are going to cost you.
Thank you. Did you have an offer that you wanted to extend to the participants today?
So I would say that the biggest thing right now for anybody out there looking for cash flow management assistance is if you go to my website, elevatingprofits.com, and you go to the useful tools section, there's a budget worksheet in there. There's a couple other things that can really help you get that process started if you've never created a budget for your business. There's a downloadable spreadsheet there that can help you get that in place.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Amanda. Miss Jennifer?
Well, my closing thought is don't buy things from Amazon. They're going to succeed. They're doing just fine. There are so many marvelous things that are being put out within our community. There are all kinds of food. You can buy soap from a soap maker. You can be part of a CSA. You can find local people to do all kinds of things. And it is through that effort of taking the money that you have and letting that go out to local resources that Fort Collins and our community is going to be able to bounce back quickly. And it's in all of our benefit to do that. So I encourage you to seek ways to buy whatever you can buy on a local basis. That's my big closing thought. I will say that it's, again, if you want a free appointment, it is Larimer Sbdc, that stands for Small Business Development Center.org. And we'd be happy to help you get started.
Thank you so much. So I just have a few closing comments. I think there's been a repeat theme today, and that is that cash flow is the lifeblood of a business. And the pandemic has required many business owners to shift into the survival mode, where your main objective might be, okay, how can I pay cash out later, but bring cash in sooner? So I just wanted to close with a few tips around cash flow. Number one, qualify for emergency funding and any grants that you can. I'm sure most of you have already applied for PPP and EIDL. If not, if you haven't applied for PPP and you are eligible, please take advantage of the second round of funding. I know Jennifer and I had this conversation where some people are taking kind of this moral stance of having a guilt because maybe they feel like someone else needs it more than they do. The idea and the expectation is that the government is going to fully fund this program. So take the money when you can get it. And as a financial advisor, the first rule of investing is to take the free money, right? You always take your match, so take the money. Number two, track expenses. So not only will this help you in finding those places where you might be able to reduce or eliminate your costs, but it's also going to be required for document support for your PPP, your EIDL, and potentially some of the grants that you might apply for. Third, talk to your lenders and your vendors. I didn't put those together because they rhyme. Talk to your bank and your other financial institutions for which you conduct business and find out what type of client relief programs they have in place, because financial institutions have these deferral programs in place. We've been talking about what businesses can do, but businesses are made up of people. And when we talk about cash flow, you got to think about your global cash flow. It's not just about the business cash flow, but it's also about your personal cash flow. So take advantage if there's opportunities for you to defer mortgages, auto loans, credit cards. Take advantage of everything you can without guilt, because these companies are doing that because it's also in their best interest that your company survive. So don't feel any guilt. Take advantage of any deferrals. If you are a current SBA loan holder, and you maybe have already heard this, there's nothing you need to do, but the Sba Debt Relief program is going to make 6 months of principal and interest payments on your loan. So your 7A, your 504, your micro loans, if you have Colorado Enterprise Fund or Colorado Lending Source. So Sba Debt Relief is making 6 months of those payments. You don't need to do anything. That's going to happen automatically. Let's see. With vendors, going back to my rhyming, my vendors and lenders. With vendors, ask about extending terms and just how they might be able to help you. Your partnership with your vendors is also vital to their business. So keep that in mind. Open up the communication lines. Number 4, and I know my accounting gals are going to appreciate this one, do a 12-month cash forecast and put the good, the bad, and the ugly in there. Put all the scenarios in there of how this could pan out for your business, because when you have that data in front of you, at least that empowers you then to make informed decisions. And I think also we talked a lot about landlords today. If you're seeking relief from your landlord, be able to have a frank conversation and communicate that cash forecast. You don't have to get into details, but instead of just saying, I can't pay you, try to negotiate a plan of what you can do and what you can pay over the next several months. And I know that they'll be more willing to work with you. And the last thing I'll say is focus on what you can control. Turn off news notifications. They can be absolutely anxiety inducing. I'm not advocating that you don't stay informed. Please do stay informed, but I just encourage you to not get swallowed up by all of this information that's coming at us that sometimes can be in a negative context. So pull away from the chaos, just keep moving. And I know this is it's difficult, easier said than done, but don't make emotional decisions. So the last question we answered was about what kind of advisors you should have. Rely heavily on your advisors and your mentors right now to help you not make those emotional decisions, because they can act as a countermeasure for you as you're navigating the difficult times that we're going through. So thanks again so much to our panelists, Amanda, Kendall, Ryann, Hodge, Jennifer, Spencer. You guys were fantastic. And thank you all today that joined us for today's session. We hope that we were able to give you some good nuggets to take away to use in your business, or maybe answer some questions that you needed clarification on. Again, if you want to go to the Thrive 2020 NoCo Facebook group, we've already dropped a ton of resources and links in there during this session so that you'll be able to access that. There will also be an email that goes out after today's session with that link in there, so if you don't have to go search for it. We are hosting 5 more sessions this week as part of the Thrive Virtual Summit. Tomorrow's is on sales and marketing, always a very popular topic. And the panelists are going to be sharing with you how to pivot your sales and marketing efforts, but also how to prepare as we're moving into this next phase, right? A lot of folks are going back to work today. So with that, my final thought, stay healthy and optimistic. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones. Thank you so much for joining us today, and everyone take care. Bye-bye.